Welcome to the Teacher's Lounge, a podcast dedicated to providing real-life resources for early education professionals. The Teacher's Lounge is hosted by Noelle Dentino and Jessica Day. Together, they bring almost 50 years of combined experience in and out of the early education classroom, offering a wealth of knowledge and practical insights that you need now if you're in childcare. Whether you're a new assistant or making the leap from lead teacher to director, we have you covered. Join us as we delve into the unique challenges and opportunities of each role, sharing our experiences and expertise with practical tools to help you succeed. So, grab a cup of coffee or your favorite drink, and let's jump into the lounge.
Welcome back to the Teacher's Lounge, where we provide practical insights to support early childhood education professionals. I'm Jessica, and today's episode is dedicated to the directors out there. We're going to explore how you can mentor your floating teachers and lead teachers by utilizing a podcast designed specifically for floating teachers, titled 5 Tips to be an Effective Floating Teacher in Early Childhood Education. Floating teachers play a crucial role in the smooth operation of your center, but they often face unique challenges. With the right guidance, they can become some of your most valuable team members. In this episode, I'll share how you can use this podcast as a mentoring tool to empower your floating teachers and lead teachers. And I'll also suggest an activity you can do at your next staff meeting to reinforce these concepts. Step 1. Introduce the podcast and set the stage. The first step is to introduce the 5 Tips to Being an Effective Floating Teacher podcast to your team. You can start by explaining why you chose this particular podcast and how it aligns with your goals for the center. Emphasize the importance of the floating teacher role and how this podcast offers practical tips that can help them become more effective and engaged in their work. Before playing the podcast during the staff meeting, take a moment to set the stage. Let your team know that the tips shared in this podcast are not just for floating teachers, but also for lead teachers who work with them. This will help everyone understand that the goal is to create a cohesive, supportive environment where every team member, regardless of their role, can contribute to the success of the classroom. Step 2. Listen together and reflect. Once the stage is set, play the podcast for the group. As they listen, encourage them to take notes or jot down any thoughts or questions that come to mind. This active listening will prepare them for the reflection and discussion that will follow. After the podcast ends, facilitate a reflection session. Ask open-ended questions like, what stood out to you from the podcast? Or, how can we apply these tips in our classrooms? This reflection period allows both floating and lead teachers to share their thoughts and consider how these strategies can be implemented in their daily routine. Encourage the lead teachers to think about how they can better support their floating colleagues and ask the floating teachers how they feel they can contribute more effectively to the classrooms they enter. This mutual reflection fosters a sense of collaboration and shared responsibility. Step 3. Conduct reversal activity. Now that your team has listened to the podcast and reflected on its content, it's time for an activity that will deepen their understanding and application of the tips. One effective exercise is a role reversal activity. Here's how it works. Pair up your floating teachers with lead teachers. Each pair will take turns playing each other's role. The floating teacher will step into the shoes of a lead teacher and vice versa. During this role play, the lead teacher might ask the floating teacher to help with a specific task, while the floating teacher practices being proactive and engaging with the classroom routine. After the role play, bring the group back together for a debrief. Ask questions like, what did you learn from stepping into each other's roles? And how did it feel to approach the classroom from a different perspective? This activity not only builds empathy, but also highlights the importance of communication and collaboration between roles. Step 4. Develop an action plan. Following the role reversal activity, it's important to turn the insights gained into actionable steps. As the director, guide your team in developing an action plan that incorporates the tips from the podcast. For example, you might decide to create a checklist for floating teachers that includes key classroom routines and schedules, helping them to integrate more smoothly into each classroom they enter. Or you could establish regular check-ins between floating and lead teachers to discuss what's working well and what could be improved. This action plan should be a collaborative effort with input from both floating and lead teachers. By involving everyone in the process, you ensure that the plan is practical, realistic, and something the entire team is committed to implementing. Step 5. Follow up and provide ongoing support. The final step is to follow up the action plan and provide ongoing support. After the staff meeting, check in with your floating and lead teachers regularly to see how the strategies are being implemented. Are the floating teachers finding it easier to integrate into classrooms? Are the lead teachers feeling more supported? Provide constructive feedback and celebrate successes, no matter how small. This positive reinforcement will encourage your team to continue applying the tips from the podcast and will help create a culture of continuous improvement. Additionally, consider using the podcast as a recurring resource. You could revisit it during future meetings or use it as a training tool for new hires. By making it a part of your center's ongoing professional development, you reinforce the importance of the floating teacher role and ensure that these best practices become a core part of your team's approach. Utilizing the 5 tips to be an effective floating teacher. I've put a link in the show notes to this episode for you. Using this podcast as a mentoring tool can have a powerful impact on your center. By listening together, reflecting, engaging in role reversal activities, and developing a shared action plan, you can strengthen the collaboration between floating and lead teachers and create a more cohesive, supportive environment. Thank you for joining me today on the Teacher's Lounge. I hope you found these strategies helpful and that you're inspired to mentor your floating teachers and lead teachers in new and meaningful ways. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with other directors and subscribe for more insights and tips. Until next time, keep fostering a culture of collaboration and excellence in your center.
And that brings us to the end of this episode of the Teacher's Lounge. We're so grateful for your time and hope you found our discussion helpful and inspiring. Remember, you are doing an amazing job in the field of early education, and we're here to support you every step of the way. Until next time, take care, and we'll be back soon with more resources, insights, and inspirations to help you succeed. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on all our social medias to stay up to date on the latest happenings inside the lounge. Keep up the great work. We're cheering you on.